Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to be multiplying mixed numbers. So we're going to find that there is just one additional step. If you want to turn to chapter 10, lesson 7, that's the lesson that we're working on today, chapter 10, lesson 7. I'm going to click fast forward here. If you need to pause the video to get to the right page, feel free to do so. We're going to be doing just a kind of little bit of a review on how to multiply um, just fractions, and then we're going to be looking at the new lesson for today. So again, it's chapter 10, lesson 7. So as you can see, the numbers that we're multiplying together here is 1/2 times 3 and 1/2. So let's look at the example. We've got a blueberry muffin recipe calls for 1/2 cup of blueberries. A blueberry pie recipe calls for 3.5 times more blueberries. How many cups of blueberries are needed to make the pie? So we've got 1/2 times 3 and 1/2. And there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. We can do it by shading. And as you can see here, it says how many squares did you shade? Well, the shading work is actually down here. Excuse me. So this was cut into halves. There were 2 rows. So if we were actually shading this, we would have shaded the whole half a row, or half of this. And then you can see there's kind of little darker lines here that was broken up into 3.5. That's where this came from. So we got 1 here, 2, 3.5. And then they shaded that in. So if you were visualizing this whole thing as being shaded in, but remember that we were looking at what was shaded together. So they took, and there's 7 total quarter boxes. This is 1/4 of a box that were shaded in. So it would take 4 quarters to make one whole, and then there would have been 3 quarters left over. So the answer would have been 1 3/4. But it's kind of walking you through this. It says, how many squares did you shade? 7. And so the shaded squares can be arranged, and they show you how to arrange that. Step 3, though, your answer is the number of shaded sections, and then it says the number of squares in each section of model, and they said 4. So let me show you where that came from. So let me go back to the previous section. So remember I said there was this dark line here, splitting this up? There are actually 4 boxes in here. And so that's kind of where that 4 comes from. So the blueberry pie recipe calls for 1 3/4 cups of blueberries. So shading and modeling is one way that you can do this. And I'm going to back up to this one just real quickly here because I want to show you the other way that you could do this. So I'm going to kind of sketch out this problem here. We have 1/2 times 3.5. And when we multiply mixed numbers, we multiply fractions, we multiply straight across. Well, this one is in a fraction format, but the 3.5 is not in a fraction format. It is in a mixed number format. So if you remember back to going from an improper or a mixed number into an improper fraction, we made these little marks here, 3 times 2 plus 1, to give you your numerator, and your denominator stayed the same. So 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So 3 1/2 is equivalent to 7/2. If you can't remember how to do that, go back to your changing from a mixed number into an improper fraction. And then reminder of how to multiply fractions, you just multiply straight across, don't have to do anything. So we've got 1 times 7 is 7, and 2 times 2 is 4. So I wanted to show you this to kind of show you that this is how you get the 7/4 that they're talking about when they actually color it in. So that's where that 7/4 comes from when you do it just using the numbers and doing it numerically versus drawing it out. So today's assignment, I'm going to let you do it either way. I think it's personally easier just to do the numeric way rather than draw it all out. So as we look here, we got 1 1/2 times 3 3/4. The rows were cut into fourths. This was cut into halves. But it says in here, they're showing you the numerical way to do it. It says write each mixed number as an improper fraction. So the actual step is right here telling you to do that. So 1 1/2, remember 1 times 2 plus 1 is 3. Denominator stays the same. And 3 3/4, 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15. Denominator stays the same. That's where this 3/2 comes from, and this is where the 15/4 comes from. 1 times 2 plus 1 is 3. Denominator stayed the same, 2. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15. Denominator stayed the same, 4. We don't have to worry about having the same denominator because we're just going to multiply straight across. 3 times 15 is that 45 that you're seeing here. 2 times 4 is 8. And then changing back from an improper fraction into a mixed number, how many times does 8 go into 45? So if we were to sketch this out as a division problem, because remember that's what that fraction bar means, is to divide. And if you do 45 divided by 8, you wrote it out this way. 8 goes into 4 0 times, so I'm going to put an X there. 8 goes into 45 5 times, and 8 times 5 is 40. So we would subtract that off, and we would have a remainder of 5. So I want to show you where this 5 5/8 comes from. So 8 goes into 45 5 whole times. There would be 5 left over. That's that numerator right there. And your denominator is your divisor. What are you dividing by? That's where that 8 comes from. So that's where those numbers come from, 5 5/8. But again, you have your flip book. You can go through those steps again. But it's just dividing that out because the fraction bar means to divide. And that's what you're doing is a division problem. So the answer is 5 5/8. 1 1/2 times 3 3/4 is 5 5/8. The guided practice, they walk you through some of the steps. They show you 4 1/5 gets modified or changed into an improper fraction. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1 is 21. That's where that 21 comes from, and your denominator stayed the same. This one is already a fraction, so you didn't have to do anything. Multiply straight across. 21 times 1 is 21. 5 times 2 is 10. And then here's that step, changing this back into a mixed number. So 21 divided by 10. How many times does 10 go into 2? It doesn't. We'll put a little X there. 10 goes into 21 twice. 2 times 10 is 20. Subtract that off. You get 1 left over. So I want you to see when I click this where that 2 1/10 comes from. 2 1/10 is right here. 2 1/10. Oops, sorry, went back one too many. So here's the 2, here's the 1, here's the 10. So I hit it back forward again. 2 1/10. So 4 1/5 times 1/2 is 2 1/10. So it says explain to find the product of two mixed numbers. Step number 1, change your mixed numbers into an improper fraction. Step number 2, multiply your numerators, multiply your denominators. Step 3, simplify by changing it back from an improper fraction into a mixed number. Those are the main steps. So today, as you're looking at today's assignment, 2/3 is already a fraction. You don't have to do anything with that. 1 times 3 plus 1 is 4. So this becomes 4/3 times 2/3. And again, you multiply straight across. This one, you're not going to have to change back into a mixed number because you're going to end up with a fraction, and it's not going to create an improper fraction or improper fraction. You're just going to have a regular fraction answer there. Here you have 2/5 times 2 3/4. This is a mixed number, so you got to change this into a fraction. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 3 is 11, so this becomes 11/4. And again, the steps, the first step is to change your mixed numbers into improper fractions and then multiply straight across. This one you will need to change because you will have an improper fraction and you're going to have to change that into a mixed number. Here, that needs to be changed into a fraction. This is already a fraction, so you don't have to do anything with that one. But any of these mixed numbers that you have in your problems today, you're going to have to first change them into improper fractions. As always, if you have questions, just let me know. I'm happy to answer them. Don't forget on Wednesdays and Fridays, you can Zoom chat with me personally. So if you have problems on this assignment, you can always ask to do a video Zoom chat. So take care and we'll be back with you soon. Bye-bye.